the basic moral issue of exclusion, it also means that the arts becomes dominated by what I often call a middle class sensibility.
Darren McGarvey, welcome to the Speakeasy.
Hello, it's lovely to be here.
Oh, thanks so much for coming. So, with the Speakeasy vibe, we're trying to conjure a time maybe we're between the wars, maybe there's some dark forces outside, trouble is brewing, but we've got a slightly surreptitious space for some conversations, from free-flowing conversation, and we can say what we think and we don't have to worry about being vilified.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what we're going for first.
Good luck with that. It's very idealistic.
It is, isn't it? But first of all, congratulations on your new book.
Thank you.
On the trauma industrial complex. I see it everywhere here in Glasgow. It's got very good placement in a lot of bookshops, and I'm sure you've worked really hard to take it on the road. And do you want to say a little bit about the motivation for the book?
Yeah, certainly. Really, the book kind of came out of me coming to a point where I realised that when I wrote my first book, Poverty Safari, in which I disclosed some of the details of difficulties in my childhood, that actually that was part of a phenomenon that was growing then that I wasn't completely aware of. And that phenomenon ultimately is the public airing of trauma, based subconsciously on a belief that declaring it publicly will help you to heal from it. And the book's about why that's a misguided assumption a lot of the time, and my experience of the reality of becoming publicly identified with a very specific time in your life that you disclosed before you had even made real sense or meaning of that. So it draws on my lived experience, but in a way that I think models a very useful way of drawing on lived experience, and attempts to outline for the reader how they might contemplate events in their life differently if they genuinely go on a healing journey rather than just talking about what happened.
I mean, I have to say that I love the combination of the personal and the analytical and the kind of polemic. I think it's a really great way of drawing people in. You do play little tricks with the reader.
Yeah.
I won't say what the tricks are because I don't want to, I don't want to be a spoiler. But that combination of drawing people in with some of the lived experience, your specific examples, but also, as you say, analysing, explaining the potential dangers of this sharing everything culture without the support before you're ready, oversharing maybe?
Yes, and the thing is, many of us are predisposed to maybe say a little too much in life, but that's a safe thing to do usually at a dinner table or in a restaurant or at a recovery meeting. You know, I've had times when I've went into my 12-step meeting and I've been dealing with some real adversity and I need somewhere to discharge, basically just describing what it is that I think is happening to me in that moment. It's a bit different when you do that at the level of national media, which many of us will feel compelled to do, either because we have been victims of some horrendous act of abuse or some unspeakable tragedy, whether that's directly or indirectly. But also social media, part of what makes it so valuable is that we are willing to offer ourselves as a form of cultural capital.
So we're human commodities now.
Exactly.
And we're just putting it all out there for people to monetize, right?
Exactly. And as we know, social media is governed by many perverse incentives, but it's a bit like a casino. You know, the house always wins. It always wins. It doesn't matter what side of an argument
and the house
you're
is
on.
in California.
Exactly. And so, you know, when you lose, then one of the ways that you might lose is that feeling of insecurity or a feeling of volatility. having disclosed something on impulse because you saw it was a trending topic or there was something going on in your life. And then there's a part of you that later kind of regrets that, either within a short passage of time, you know, the fog might pass, or it could be, and I hear this all the time in the recovery community, people come in and they have stories about their lives and they have characters and villains and heroes in their lives. And as they go on a healing journey and become reconciled with some of the subtler truths of their story, they come to regret the way that they might have portrayed certain things in their lives based on their limited knowledge or understanding, or sometimes justifiably empathy.
And this could be family members or friends, lovers, whatever it is.
Exactly. And so when we overshare in normal human relationships, that's fine. But when you become publicly identified with a certain story, you might at some point feel a certain kind of pressure to live up to the reputation that now precedes you. And that can bring you out of alignment with the truth of your life as it is in the present. And that's certainly been the case with me at points. And I guess the book is an attempt to clean up some of the mess of my public disclosures, but do it in a way that's not just about me saying, no, I meant this when I said that, and no, you're wrong about that. And actually me holding my own story to account in a way that I don't think you'd see many people doing it.
I was going to ask you about that. You are quite self-critical, sometimes quite harsh with yourself, actually, at different points in this book. Mm-hmm. And you go on a journey even within the book. It's not the same position throughout the book in terms of how you're feeling about yourself. And I suppose, was the book process kind of therapeutic in itself?
It was therapeutic in a sense that I wasn't second guessing myself when I wrote this. With my second book, I did a lot of second guessing because the first book was so successful and I wasn't expecting that. So I thought, what do people want to hear from me? And then I started to realise that they probably wanted me to continue on that personal journey, but I had been so burned out from doing that, the first one, that I pulled back. So the second book is very much a standard non-fiction about class inequality.
Not so personal, more analytical.
I'm kind of absent in it. I'm there observing, and sometimes there's little nuggets of lived experience. And funnily enough, readers, as many people bought it, a lot of them didn't finish it. They struggle to connect with it because it wasn't driven by lived experience. So I sort of did this deal with my audience in the beginning that I wasn't aware of, where a level of autobiography has to be included in anything that I do. No matter what my abilities are, my talents are, my achievements, I don't get work based on my merit. I get work based on also my willingness to draw from my lived experience. So I thought, let me do that. Let me give people a bit more of what they want, but let me also tell them what I want. And let me try and renegotiate the terms of this relationship that I have with readers.
Having only just met you, but having read your books, of course, I admire your story and your journey and your resilience, but I have to say more than that. I actually admire your writing. You're a great wordsmith.
Thank you.
And going back to Poverty Safari, it is a very, very fine piece of writing. I don't think of it as a misery memoir. I think of it as an exquisite piece of literature, actually. And I suppose it's particularly surprising, astonishing, really, because you talk early in that first book about your relationship with books and not having had a very long and strong relationship with books. Books weren't for you, or you thought books weren't for you, or you didn't like long books or short books. And I don't know whether that is slightly hyped for the surprise value or whether that is true, but when the author is telling you about that relationship with books and then produces such a literary book, actually. I mean, apart from anything else, the chapters are named for very famous books. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, certainly. So my upbringing was not void of culture and not void of literature. In a sense, very musical family, very politically engaged family. Certainly some family members. My grandmother, the matriarch of the family, was a prolific writer of angry letters, you know, and if there was a wrong needing righted, out came the table and the fountain pen, you know.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of part of the culture in our family. But it wasn't the kind of family where, you know, people are sitting on the couch reading a book, you know. And I think that's more to do with maybe some undiagnosed neurodivergence in our family, or just that sort of culture not being modelled. And so the subsequent generations don't pick it up. I make more effort to read with my children and engage with, you know, that side of their education. Although I do find it a struggle. I'm not someone who is like, yes, I can sit down and pick up this book. I've always associated reading long form with labour, with a sort of endurance. There's something about the process that I go through mentally when I'm reading, where I'm too aware that I'm reading, that I'm not absorbing the text. And so really the way that I made up that shortfall was just by dint of technology evolving. So I left home at 17. I hadn't done as well at school as maybe I could have done if I hadn't been suffering bereavement and other problems. Then I became homeless about 2 years later. I didn't have access to the internet for about 10 years. So all my peers from more affluent backgrounds are all 10 years in front of me by the time I get sober. I'm going to college with 18-year-olds at 30 years old, right? And the thing I can't get my head round is the internet and how things work. And I'm a kind of Luddite in that sense, right? But then social media, I start getting the hang of that, which is just say what you think on this thing. Other people interact with it. And so I start gaining a following for sharing thoughts and opinions, but also parallel to that, you have this explosion of YouTube where you have people talking in depth about a whole range of subjects, politics, science, philosophy. And I started to find that I was absorbing information that the way that other people might from a book by watching people discuss and debate things. And so it helped me to learn more.
That's amazing. I mean, this is almost the opposite of the conventional story whereby thinking and discourse is degraded by the internet, by this shouty social media. You're telling an alternative, positive story of actually learning from it, of a democratizing effect.
Yeah, exactly. And there are pros and cons to every technological advance. Yeah. Obviously, I've experienced some of the negative sides of it as well. But when I was just coming about sober, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, the algorithms were very generous. You got a lot of organic reach. So one message could reach hundreds of people. You didn't have to pay more. It wasn't like digital real estate back then. We didn't realise, though, that we were in silos. So the world we thought we were engaging with wasn't the real world at all. And we didn't realise that once we had all integrated this into our lives, that the owners of these platforms would then start tightening the screw in terms of what we could see, how much reach we had. And, you know, that became another predicament. But ultimately, I would say that it was a combination of a kind of natural creativity that was encouraged in our family, coupled with eventual access to technology that was denied me due to the deprivation I was in, that led to me being able to cobble together the skill set necessary to write a book. But obviously,
it's more than cobbled to. The book is not cobbled together. It's exquisitely well put together.
What's interesting to me about that book is it's the one that I have almost 100% creative control over.
The first book?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's structured in an unconventional way where really how the chapters relate to each other is the themes, and they relate to each other in terms of the emotional journey you go on. But if you sit down with an editor at a big publisher and you gave them that in a manuscript, the first thing they would say is, we need to restructure this because...
So did you have to fight that?
No, Lewis, I just got when I was with Lewis, the independent publisher that had the foresight to publish it and really stand behind it. And they done very well out of it. I mean, they won more awards for publishing it than I did for.
But you won the Orwell Prize.
No, I know. I'm having a dig at Scottish. I'm having a dig at Scottish literary societies. Don't worry, it's very parochial.
It's going over my head, but
yeah, that's fine.
But it's a beautiful. But it was your first book. You had this, not very easy relationship with reading. You said yourself. I wonder actually about how everyone's relationship with reading is affected by too much social media, too much phones, but you may have thoughts about that. And you win the Orwell Prize for that first book, and suddenly you're a public figure. And in particular, as you say, commenting on poverty.
Yeah.
Explaining.
And relapse. This is the thing.
Right.
I'm in relapse when that's all happening.
Right.
So I remember on my way to the Orwell Prize ceremony with really bad stomach problems from opiates that I was abusing at the time, and taking too long to choose an outfit. I was around the area trying to buy something to wear, but my stomach was all bloated.
Yeah.
Because of all of the problems opiates causes your internal system. And then I remember being at the ceremony and me taking so long to realise that I had won it, because everyone around me who was with me, publicist, publisher, agent, by that time Pan Macmillan had signed a deal to republish the book, and what a win that was for them, because we literally came from their office, and then the book was Orwell Prize winning and they had the new edition just ready to go. But I remember going backstage to do press, and the first question was, can anyone take this off me? I just felt it was a hoax. I just couldn't believe it. I didn't understand why it was me that was chosen. And I remember being, and journalists all around me, and just suddenly that moment, you're like, boom. And I'm just standing there. They don't know I'm struggling. No one knows I'm struggling. Some of these people are so well off, they don't even know what a person with my kind of struggle looks like when they're struggling. So I'm just emptying Solpadeine Max tablets into a glass and pouring water in it. And no, everyone just thinks I'm taking paracetamol because that's what I want them to think. And I remember that night messaging my wife from the hotel, and I was starting to experience a kind of phantom pains that you get when you use opiates. So when you start to go into withdrawal, you experience aches and pains, which then means that you feel you need to take more. And for me, it was toothache, which was a great working class problem to have at such a posh ceremony, Yeah. So that was the actual private hell that I was going through at the time. So I did not expect it to do as well as it did. The book's written for local people. It makes references to what most people in the UK would consider obscure local communities and characters.
But it's the way you tell the story, isn't it? So I know you feel very strongly that people want to hear you mining your own life and your own trauma, but it isn't just that, is it? It's the way that you. It's your storytelling.
It's a voice, isn't it? It's a perspective.
So for your future work, for example, you could bring your voice. You don't have to be mining your own experience, but you're still bringing your analysis and your way of speaking, your way of writing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that there are a combination of reasons why Poverty Safari cut through the way that it did. It was a different world. It was a different economy. The misery memoir genre was getting stale and predictable. And so it freshened it up a bit, because I remember getting letters and messages from other people who had books coming out. Some have done very well now and become screenwriters and stuff. And they would send me proof copies of their book with a letter inside, saying how it had inspired them. And all of that was really, really nice. But it was also... at that time I felt like my back was against the wall, and there's something that you can tap into when you're writing with your back against the wall that you lose when your back's not against the wall anymore. So when you're not struggling, your writing might actually gain new qualities that make it on a technical level much better writing.
But you lose a bit of edge.
You lose something that people really connect with. It's the sort of shock of, who is this working class guy with this attitude that he's just taken out there to all these middle class people? I mean, this guy doesn't give a fuck. And it's like a page turner, because you're just like, what the fuck is he going to say next? Then when you start doing well, a kind of caution creeps in.
Right.
You're conditioned.
Because you're fitting in.
You're conditioned.
You've learnt the manners and the, yeah.
You start meeting all the middle class people, and it humanises them in a way that's kind of horrible, you know, because it's like, I feel bad now for saying that you're a cunt. Do you know what I mean? Excuse my language.
Not at all.
It's like that, you know, and I've got to honour the fact that my experience has changed and my views on certain things have changed as a result of that experience. And in the new book, I really grapple with that.
You do. And you almost kind of, you don't caricature yourself, but you do certainly, you know, take the piss out of yourself a little bit, and also say quite seriously that maybe it is for younger men to be the angry men now and whatever. Yeah. But there was one aspect of that journey from the first to the third book that I really wanted to sort of open up with you, and that's this relationship between, you know, the big politics and the class politics. And the righteous anger on the one hand, and the responsibility side of things. Mm. And I understand this is partly because of your therapeutic journey and your recovery, and it's important to take responsibility for that. Otherwise, it won't stick, right? Yeah. But on the other hand, if one turns that into the bigger political picture, it's very easy to seep into, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. What about you, young man? Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
And I think that's why that kind of argument has to come from someone with lived experience, because there's a delicate way to parse that out. And I would probably say maybe a quarter of the book's whole word count is just me taking time to very delicately say what I mean when I'm talking about really contentious concepts like victimhood or trauma, and just saying, look, I understand. Here are all the different ways that people look at this. Here is how I'm looking at this now. You know, an author coming at that from a more ideological standpoint with a caricature of victimhood or the left in mind would really be writing a book to appeal to people who are very uncharitable when it comes to certain issues, and, you know, just see everyone as a snowflake. And I take a lot of time just to make sure that I'm being as gentle as possible. But certainly I do feel strongly that social media has a radicalising effect in many ways. And one of the unfortunate things that I see is that you have people who want to bypass the dealing with trauma thing and just go straight into frontline campaigning. And I think we can see from the tone that certain campaigns take and the radioactive nature of discourse that if you're operating in a hyper-vigilant state, using a digital infrastructure that is designed by its very essence to keep you engaged by frightening you and showing you things that make you angry.
Polarisation and anger, and that's how you get the more clicks and followers. And
we're talking about mass emotional dysregulation, much of it rooted in trauma. A lot of people are online so often, the world they think they're living in is not actually happening out there. It's all being filtered through social media. That doesn't mean the threats they perceive are illegitimate or made up, but it's the magnitude of the threat, the omnipresence of the threat. You spend enough time on social media and you literally are just living in anxiety. And if political campaigning is your way of discharging that, then you might be raising awareness of certain issues, but you're also unintentionally adding to a culture of escalation. Because when you're hypervigilant and triggered, then you also can develop from your victimhood a sense of moral entitlement, which means that the outgroup, are not entitled to care, consideration. They are seen in very black and...
Demonised, right?
And it's not even deliberate. But the minute that you do that to someone, then they do that to you, and that's how the escalation happens. In order to engage with political campaigning and use our anger properly, then we have to be quite disciplined and committed to trying to uphold and live by certain principles and how we think and discuss certain things.
That's right.
And when we fall below them, we have to take accountability for that. all of that's gone out the window. It's more like throwing all that aside is now a precondition of political participation. And that for me is, I can feel myself getting triggered by that. I find that very threatening.
Yeah.
See, when you're operating in a world where there's structureless punishment and kangaroo courts, and it's all just about who has the loudest voice or who's the most intimidating presence, that's the world that scares me, you know?
And is that all online, or do you see that as seeping into and influencing the quote unquote real world?
I can only base it on my own experience, but I'll tell you something. I mean, even just this morning, the amount of people who have said something to me on social media that I know for a fact they would never say if I was sitting on a bus or walking past a row of shops in East Kilbride. There's a disinhibiting quality to social media, which on one hand, it's very convenient and easy to express things, but we don't have a sense of consequences. I think the most people... they like social media because it means that they can say things that they wouldn't have the courage to say, sometimes understandably so, but they can do it remotely.
Yeah.
But it also leads...
anonymously, some of them, and certainly remotely, and no consequence.
Yeah.
And to hell with the consequence for the person who might be receiving it, which makes me want to ask you about masculinity in all of this, because... women, to some extent, are bearing the brunt of some of this stuff online, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I think with X in its current format, where, you know, Musk has saw this as an opportunity to really empower what he thinks is free speech, but ultimately has become a kind of sewer for the worst kind of rhetoric.
Yeah. And toxic masculinity, misogyny, rape threats, death threats.
Now we have a discourse where all of those things that we were trying to stamp out are all being given this new intellectual muscularity by kind of faux public intellectuals, who really are subject a lot of the time to audience capture. So they say some things that are quite innocuous, that engages young men who feel... rightly or wrongly, that they've been forgotten or that they've been villainised in this age of social justice, and then that person starts to notice through their feedback loops, this is my audience, they're very engaged, and they keep serving up more of the stuff.
Yeah.
There's only so much moderate stuff you can serve up before you've got to start serving up the spicier stuff, and unfortunately I think that's what appears to be happening. And even more dangerous when you can adopt what feels like an intellectual justification for what is ultimately the same old male behaviours.
Well, this worries me about some of these movements, even in politics, and I'm not just talking about the far right, I'm talking about things like Blue Labour. Mm-hmm. You know, this kind of let's get back to social conservatism and these traditional values. And I'm thinking, well, but what about women and gay people and minorities and refugees? Are they just all going to be thrown under the bus with impunity? I
feel like underneath it all is this overwhelm where people really just want to engage in the fantasy that in an interconnected world where a problem's happening somewhere else, it's going to be happening where you are pretty soon. You can just stick your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. I mean, even I think about it like this. Even if you gave Tommy Robinson a magic wand, right, and he can just wave away all the problematic Muslims and all the problematic immigrants, what are you left with? Because that's when you really get a chance to really consider what it is about your country you're proud of, right? When people say people are annoyed that we are proud of England and that we're proud of our nationality, look, I'm cool with that. I'm Scottish, so I understand that. Patriotism. The difference between Scotland and England is that Scotland has been a subject of England. England has been, everyone else in the world has been England's subject. So it's weird that this victim mentality that runs through a lot of the far-right rhetoric is so strong, when actually it might just be the difficult...
It's the loss of empire, isn't it?
It's the national ego needs relativised.
Yeah.
You know, it just needs brought down to size, right? It's like guys that used to be bodybuilders and then they're 80 and they're putting on a wee bit of weight. And it's like, it all comes to us all. It comes to us all. Yeah. You know, you can either keep charging about like you're a 20-year-old in your prime and get knocked out, or you can just accept nature's run its course.
So that's the British Empire. That's the analysis of the British Empire. It's a former bodybuilder that's 80 and put on a bit of weight.
Yeah, and the roids are wearing off, and it's all just looking a bit dodgy. And I don't like. I'm being facetious there, right?
You're not. You're being funny.
I understand. I understand that social media, as well as democratising and raising awareness and all the positive impacts it has, I don't think anyone could argue this, also led to a strain of activism that's terminally online, that doesn't engage with real people, doesn't understand the political landscape, and therefore doesn't factor in certain things like public opinion when trying to advance its particular aims, right? Now, I saw that form of activism erupting through social media in 2016. I thought, these are good theories and concepts, but the way you guys talk about them is off-putting. That moral certainty, that idea that having any kind of question or challenge to it means that you are actually just complicit in the thing that they're fighting against. All of those tricks of manipulation, really, that they don't even know they're doing. But the overcorrection from that, for us to go like to the precipice of fascism happening in the street, seems to me to be a wee bit over the top, you know? When you see people like Tommy Robinson, who admittedly, if you watch him in a long form interview, can seem like quite an affable, charming, intelligent guy who's articulate, and that's immediately attractive to people who don't understand all the baggage that comes with him. Then he starts talking about certain things that are kind of politically innocuous now. The safety of children, the horror of grooming gangs, and these are things that naturally elicit in any morally normal person a feeling of disgust and anger and desire for retribution. But then once he's endeared you with those more innocuous things, there's this other side to him that comes out. How many times does a guy get pulled up for fighting? How many times does a guy get done for being involved in violence? This guy has a predisposition to violence, and that is part of, I'm not saying that all these people out there just now are fascist. I'm saying if the conditions are right socially, politically and economically, you've got some prime candidates who will become fully fascist.
And yet, with everything you faced in your youth, poverty, abuse, etc., you've written about it, you don't go that way. You don't go to violence. There's a gentleness. One of the things that maybe surprised me, given what happened to you when you were a kid, even at the hands of your mum, though she was a victim too, is that you don't hate women. You write very fondly about women in all your books, but particularly the first and the third. You know, whether it's your grandma or whether it's your friend who was originally a counsellor, there's a fondness and a gentleness and a reverence almost for these women. Yeah,
and I think that has come more to the fore with maturity and doing work on myself, because while I wouldn't maybe 10 years ago, I would have reacted defensively to any kind of charge of sexism or misogyny. That would have been partly due to not fully comprehending all of its different manifestations. So for me, I think it would have manifested fundamentally as a distrust. Just a distrust. A fear, because there is that reverence for women, but then there's the vulnerability that comes with that. And I always struggled with the being vulnerable part. Trusting someone, loving someone, letting someone know who you are. Safety, you know, feeling safe, which might seem an odd thing for a man to say in relationship to a woman. But there are some ways that men of a certain mould can feel overpowered by women, even if the women aren't actively trying to do that.
Sort of emotionally.
Yeah, and I think that's partly how a lot of people get sucked into certain pipelines online. They can't articulate, I feel very vulnerable around this woman who I care about because I know she has my heart in her hands, you know? But because they don't have the language to articulate that, then someone else can appeal to that vulnerability, but recontextualise it as a threat or recontextualise it as a malign intention. on the part of a woman.
But you've always had language to play with, even before you wrote books.
Yeah.
You've always had that. Well, you talked a bit about it being in your family, even if it wasn't on the bookshelf, it was there.
Well, the thing is, I mean, speaking articulately, really the key to that is just stick to talking about what you know, because it just flows. I think a lot of people, they get caught because they think if I'm going to speak about something, then I have to sound a certain way and I have to say certain things.
This is the class stuff and the accent and all of that kind of stuff.
Exactly, but it's like obviously not everyone is. We all have different talents and they're all distributed quite unevenly among us all. But a lot of the talents that people gravitate towards in their childhood and adolescence are the things that they received praise for or validation for from caregivers.
So we haven't talked about your career as a rap artist.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems relevant here because we're talking about people's different journeys into words and different ways of articulating and communicating feelings and observations. I think you've retired your rap persona now. Is that a sort of I'm too old for this sort of thing?
No, I'm still going to be an artist. It's just that the actual name Loki is something that I took on really at the ground zero of a lot of the grief and trauma that I was experiencing, and it became ultimately, and I detail this in the book, a kind of suit of armour that was parts of me dialed up to 11 in order to curry favour with people or in order to engage.
So it's like a stage persona.
Yeah, but but if you're not engaging in that with a certain level of intentionality, you can start to confuse the persona with yourself. And that's what happened to me at the height of my drinking. You know, my skill level as an MC and performance level went down, but the ego and the suit of armour became more and more immaculate. And then, you know, when I got sober and had to look at a lot of that stuff, you know, a lot of the amends that I had to make were in the hip hop community. You know, like the ways that I spoke to people or the way that I treated people. And I'm not trying to portray myself as like I was going around like a big hard man. But there was definitely a projection that I was happy to put out there, which was I'm game for conflict. And that deterred 90% of conflict. And that's exactly how people that join gangs behave. That's exactly how that young girl that's carrying an axe and a knife, she's trying to make people think I will hurt you, so don't come near me. Underneath all of that is I'm terrified of being hurt, and that's the stuff that needs to work.
I strike first.
Yep. It's game theory, you know.
And then you'll be afraid of me, and you won't bother me.
Exactly. But the saving grace, and I would say the salvation of the hip hop scene was that was a community that was very much built to absorb these behaviours and give us a means of upcycling them into something positive. So, you know, the rap battle, for example, while obviously
it's a battle.
It's a battle, but it's really like it's like two very, very good poets engaged in a joust, or depending on what way you look at it, a kind of ping pong match, you know. And you know, I was very good at that. I was quick off the draw. I was very strategic because I knew what my flaws were, and so I understood how someone would come at me. But I also understood that you win not by playing to your opponent, but playing to the crowd. You know, you get the crowd on your side. You're directing it at the crowd. And a lot of that carries into political campaigning. Mm. You know, you try not to see and get too caught up with your opponent. I think that's one of the downsides of a lot of the activism online. People forget who's watching.
Is it really activism if it's just online? I suppose it is in the 21st century.
It is. I mean, there's been a lot of great campaigns that have been online. But I think the best campaigners are the ones who have real life experience and they've got some skin in the game in the real world. I think there's a form of campaigning that is, as I said earlier, is degraded the utility of raising awareness because there's a certain kind of entitlement. just because something is morally right
Yeah.
doesn't mean the whole world is going to dance to your tune.
No.
You've got to get out there and
Absolutely.
actually argue your point in the real world.
I used to say to my colleagues, I used to work for a human rights NGO called Liberty. I used to say to my colleagues, you know, it might be nice to listen to Radio 4 and drink free trade organic coffee and read The Guardian, but you can do that on your own time because that's not campaigning. That's just living a charmed existence. That's not reaching out, persuading people who don't start out agreeing with you.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you've got a lot of people who are naturally conflict avoidant, who've fallen into campaigning because the digital version of it means they don't actually have to engage with anyone.
Yeah.
And so they don't necessarily have what it takes to get out into communities and do the sort of stuff you have to do.
And you've always done that. So there's a complete relationship, isn't there, between, yes, your inner world with all the struggle and all the trauma that you've shared, overshared, whatever, analysed. And then there's the artistic you. Mm-hmm. And then there's the political stroke grassroots you. And these three Darrens are obviously interconnected.
Well, it's really just different. I use different mediums to connect with different people in different ways.
Right.
So the hip hop is connecting with the disenfranchised people who maybe didn't do as good at school as they would have liked to have done. And hip hop and rap is a way to speak directly to them in a language that they understand. So if someone was to go and analyse all of my work, what they might see as contradictions in terms of tone or subject matter, I would argue is really just showing an understanding of the medium I'm using and who I'm communicating with, and that certain points get made more effectively through telling a story or a narrative or taking a position that's actually contrary to yours and using a character to illuminate certain things. Whereas obviously if you're writing an article for a newspaper, you're a bit more conventional in terms of how you're going to communicate that. I would say actually that my values as a person who believes in social justice and has fought for social justice, that's the unifying aspect of everything that I've done. That's the part where you'll find the continuity, irrespective of what I've actually been doing, films, books, music or whatever.
And you've been, I think, understandably critical of the arts establishment and the access, or we speak a lot about access to services and access to justice and healthcare, housing and so on. But I think in the UK in recent years, access to the arts is really not in a good place, is it?
No, it's not, because just have a look at the Edinburgh Fringe. Zara Gladman, who has been an artist for I've known of her for 10 years. She's came up with some amazing sketch comedy that she's previewed a lot of it online, built a good following, enough to do a successful run at the Fringe. But one of the great things she did before, during and after she did her very successful run was she was very open about how much it was all costing her. And I think she published a video the other day which detailed all of the upfront costs that she bears before the settlement comes in October. And it was almost £4,000, right? So that's what you need to... That was excluding accommodation because she got mates rates from someone. That means that if you want to go there and do a run, unless you've got a specific type of contract, the sort of contract that I might get with the stand, then you need to have, $4,000 just available to you before you can get into a venue and have any chance of recouping that and doing what you want to do. And you can take that kind of metaphor and you can take that and see that as a metaphor for access and entry into almost any other art form.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable.
Yeah, I agree.
And what it means is, apart from the basic moral issue of exclusion, it also means that the arts becomes dominated by what I often call a middle-class sensibility. Yeah. And that's not to say that middle-class beliefs are monolithic or that there's no nuance. But there are certain things that make middle-class things, irrespective of whether you're a Tory, a Liberal or whatever. And that's rife. That's rife in the arts.
Just excluding audiences, excluding stories and voices.
Yeah, and it also means that in certain arts cultures or in certain arts communities, a certain way of looking at the world can emerge because they're all interacting with each other and they're using the same language.
And you're telling people what is valued and what is not, who is valued and who is not, whose story counts and is interesting and inspiring and whose is not.
Exactly, and it means that things that are coming at it from a different angle, whether that's intellectually or politically, or whether that is in terms of the temperament of something, you know, being a rapper, that's often associated with increased aggression, conflict.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might leverage those things in a performance to heighten the level of engagement, you know, because it's
People have worried for a long time about the misogyny of rap, but presumably you're going to tell me it's much more complicated than that.
Well, it's not any worse than the misogyny of politics.
No.
It's not.
Or the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going to find, particularly in any male-dominated space, you're going to find those traits, but it's not inherent to rap. It's not inherent to hip-hop. It's just that our free market has selected the most marketable form and has said, there's a lot of people who like this misogynistic stuff. Let's platform that, invest in that, back
And that was even before the internet. So there's always money and conflict, right?
Exactly.
Whether it's the arms trade or whether it's arts and culture.
Exactly. But I think, you know, I'm fortunate because I understood very early on that public funding for an artist like me is very risky. Because I'm an not every artist has to or should, but I'm an artist who wants to challenge certain things, not just challenging the most powerful person, but also challenging contemporaries and peers in ways that is frowned upon in the arts, because there is a sort of monolithic ideological view of the world that comes from publicly funded art. And so I knew that the strings would get cut very quickly. So I managed to become self-sustaining and fund my own art and fund my own tour. And that's a big headache. And luckily, majority of the time, I make profit on it. But it also changes the nature of your art, because when you're part of a publicly funded community, you're not being exposed to the market forces, and while that's good because it protects you to make stuff, you also could become a bit smug about how much effect that your art's having, or how many people are interested in your art, or how successful an artist you are. So there's a trade-off between being exposed to market forces, which means you have to be a bit more pragmatic. So I have publicly funded artists or writers criticising me because I publish an article in Unheard, right, which is seen as a kind of right-wing online magazine. But my question to them is, if I don't publish with them, then where do I publish? Because they pay me a fair price for my labour. No one tells me what to write. I have final say on what headline gets put with the article. I'm treated with respect at all times, and never once has anybody changed or edited anything that I've wrote. Couldn't say the same if you did a publicly funded thing, where you would subconsciously be editing yourself because you know what the ideological view of everything is. So
there's no easy answers to arts funding, except we need more of it, and we probably need a mix, don't we? You couldn't trust the state to be the sole funder of the arts, or even the arts for new and working class artists, but at the same time, if it all goes corporate,
we need to find a way.
There are challenges for that too, and there are things that will be censored by corporates as well, right?
Absolutely, but we need to find a way to distribute funding that breaks through this bureaucratic perimeter that deters a lot of people from working class backgrounds. Because if you actually analyse the principles of an organisation like Creative Scotland, which is about being sustainable and inclusive...
Or the Arts Council in England.
I mean, you hit a wall straight away. The forms that organisations need to fill out, or individuals need to fill out, just in and of themselves, act as a kind of filtering mechanism, you know, that means that the more resilient middle class folks, they can sit down and knuckle down to that in a way that maybe other people can't. And they get access to that pot almost exclusively. So
with all these different dimensions of your life and your working life, the polemical writing, the rapping, all the stuff you do, you're a great storyteller.
Thanks.
whether it's a
I like
political
you. You
conversation.
notice things. You're noticing things about me a lot of people don't notice.
Well, it's because I'm a close reader. I'm a close reader. So I'm wondering, and you did mention a few minutes ago other writers who were inspired by you but went into screenwriting and so on. Do you think you might move into fiction? Or do you think you might experiment with fiction?
Yeah, I definitely. My family and my wife, I feel like I'm getting a gentle nudge from anyone who cares about me. The game that I'm in is very bruising. And there might be another way to tell the kind of stories I want to tell or points that I want to make through other mediums.
So using your experience, but it doesn't have to, you don't have to be the character.
Yeah. I think if I was going to do a final book in the vein of my previous work, I would do something that analyses prosperity in the same way that I've analysed poverty in the beginning. Because there is an apathy that can creep in when you become successful or prosperous, where the risks that you were prepared to take when you had nothing start to look a bit too dangerous when you have stuff. And I think if you really want to get to the core of the malaise in the UK, it's not an angry working class. It's not even a detached and rapacious elite. It's an apathetic and detached middle class that is waiting for some kind of signal as to what sort of direction it should head.
And manipulated by elites?
To protect itself, you know, because it's a natural instinct. I mean, that electorally lucrative, pivotal section of the population that any party hoping to win power has to secure before it can go anywhere else. The silent majority, the ones who own the homes and multiple cars and they're invested in the status quo. And a lot of them sense that there's a problem in this, just the way that a lot of people on the Titanic sensed it was sinking. You know, but even when they got onto lifeboats, they were scared to move away from the boat. They wanted to stay close to it because there was a light coming off it and the darkness of the ocean was just too terrifying. And I think that, you know, where we are in this country is partly dictated by that middle class impulse to conserve the little bit that it has.
And that's going to take us to the rise of reform and a far-right government coming out of these middle classes.
See, there's a part of me that's just like, fucking go for it, Nigel. Fucking go for it. I'll vote for you. Because he's now done what brought down every other government. He's made a cast iron electoral pledge. No way can he live up to that. The question is, can the left rebuild in time for the arse to fall out of that man and his whole political movement? Otherwise, then it's Tommy Robinson time. Wow. He's the next guy. He needs to be proven as a charlatan that he is. And unfortunately, though, we don't have a lot of people in this country who are ready to listen to the evidence of their eyes and ears. You know, we had Jacob Rees-Mogg's sister on Twitter today complaining about the rundown community that she's somehow found herself in. And I was thinking, it's interesting that you, a Thatcherite, who was for Brexit, would bemoan the tearing of the social fabric all around you when, you know, this is the sort of world that you have created. Yeah. This is the sort of world that you passionately argue for. But to go back to, we've went on a bit of a diversion, but to go back to what you were originally talking about, certainly I would like to maybe educate myself a wee bit more in terms of being able to use the tools that I have to pay other people to use for me in this digital world.
Right.
Learning a wee bit more about editing, things that I was doing before I left home as a kid, you know, and then I fell behind everyone because I didn't have a laptop and I didn't have access to stuff. Because I think that even if I don't go down any kind of content creation route, I feel like these are skills that are pretty fundamental to survive in the world now. And I often feel myself having inspiration to create something or say something, but I lack the skills to put it across in a way that is going to be appealing on social media. It doesn't matter how smart you are. Like, if you're just filming on a handheld phone in your room with shit lighting and shit audio, the algorithm's just like, no, down you go.
So you want these production skills, but in terms of your writing and in terms of Yeah, in terms of the pure creativity as opposed to the artisanal skills, you think maybe into fiction, maybe into
screenwriting, playwriting.
Yeah.
I think these are all kind of transferable. I think if you understand the basic core principles of story
Yeah.
and how you get people interested in a character, which I think I do understand, then you've got the core of it. There's a rhythm to a story that it must kind of follow. But also, I need to do more reading. I need to read maybe 10 novels that are of different qualities and styles to just get my first sense. I'm not saying I only need to read 10 to write a novel. I don't mean that. There's about a lot of novelists out there who just digest books in one sitting and they'll be like, this is vulgarity. This man is vandalising the English language. But
not at all.
I just mean it would be a bit I'd be a bit up myself if I thought I could just sit down and write a novel when, you know, then there's only like maybe a couple that I've actually read and I've read them to my kids.
Oh, I mean, this is very exciting. I was gonna end by asking you about hope, but I almost want to stop myself because I hear a very hopeful voice, particularly when we talk about your artistic future and the stories you're going to tell and the learning journey you're going to go on. And I just think that should be very inspiring for other people that want to be creative, that want to find their voice.
Yeah, and I mean, I said when I came in earlier, and this has been my chat a lot recently, like, for me, I feel like there might be some questions ahead in terms of what direction do things go. Part of the privilege I enjoy is having a bit of a say over what direction they go. Not everyone does, certainly not every artist or writer. But I also have to choose wisely, because as successful as some of the stuff I've done might look from a distance, I'm not out the woods yet. You know, I'm part of that risk-averse
So we've gone from
middle class.
poverty safari to prosperity blindness, or
it's because I've got
prosperity
my kids.
fear, or
I've got my kids, and my wife's an academic, and that's a sector that's going through its own kind of hell, and she's working so hard. And, you know, every time I throw the dice and it comes back good, then that's good. But if I throw it and it doesn't, you know, there's an argument that I'm being irresponsible in the longer term. So really, it's about getting the balance between what I want to do and what I feel I have to do to be responsible to my family. But these are decisions everyone has to make every day. And I'm lucky that I have at least a little bit of latitude in terms of what I can do and where I want to go.
Well, I think you've got a great deal of latitude in what you can do and where you're going to go. And as a reader of your work, certainly, I am very excited to see what the next chapter is for you, for Darren McGarvey. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much.